The number one question I get about owning a bicycle is, what kind of basic maintenance can I do to keep my bicycle running smoothly? And I always tell people there are three things. Number one, wear a helmet. Number two, keep your tires inflated. And number three, clean your drivetrain. This is something you can do yourself to keep all these components running smoothly. All you need is a rag and some lube. And so let's get into it. I'll show you how to do this. So if you don't have a fancy bike stand like I have that brings the drivetrain up to you, you can lean the bicycle against the wall like this, get the kickstand up and out of the way, and you just basically want to be able to back pedal freely so you can get to the whole chain and get to the drivetrain. So this is what a dirty chain looks like. Even though this one is technically shiny and looks okay, you can see that there is a lot of crud kind of stuck to here. And this goes back to the stickiness of different kinds of lubricant can attract more dirt or sand or whatever. When I feel this between my fingers, I'm kind of rubbing my fingers here, I can feel that there's like a sandy paste in there, and that's going to get in there and chew up the insides of the chain there. So now that we have the bike in a place where we can freely rotate it backwards, we have it sitting in a middle chain ring here, which doesn't really matter that much. And all we're really going to do is take our lubricant here, we're going to shake it up, and then we're just going to dribble it on the chain. Just once or twice around and get the chain a little wet. So it's going all the way around. There we go. And then literally just pedal it a few times, let it work its magic. We really want the chain to kind of flex back and forth as it's going through all the gears here so that the lubricant will work its way in there. And then even with this chain being as shiny as it is, check this out. We're going to wipe it off just like this. You're going to take your rag and hold it on the bottom half of the chain here and pedal backwards so that the chain runs through the rag. And you can even pull it down and move it up a little bit to get a little bit of tension on there so that it really wipes it really well. Look how disgusting that is. This chain looks shiny, but still there's a lot of dirt and filth in there. So we really want to wipe it off. So we're going to do that once and then we're going to do it again. We're going to re-lubricate. Get some lube in there, and then wipe it off. The real trick is the wiping off step. That's the piece that does the actual work, and that's the piece that most people skip. They just dump a bunch of lube on there and then just ride it wet, and that's what picks up a lot of grit and dirt and things. So really the wiping off is the real trick. There we go. Much nicer. So once we wipe off the chain, you can even get into the derailleur here and into the cassette, and don't be afraid to get in there with your hands and wipe stuff down. You can use the rag like a floss here and get in the cassette or the freewheel and clean that out as well. You can really get into the nooks and crannies here and really clean this stuff out. You can get in your derailleur and wipe all this stuff out and get as much crud and gunk off of there as possible. On some really disgusting, filthy bikes, you can get in there with a pick and you can literally pick some of the grit out, pick some of the oil and dirt out, and get that all loosened up. So don't be afraid to get in there and kind of manhandle it. This is literally the way it works. There is no one weird trick. There is no one special tool you can buy that does all this for you. You just have to kind of get in there and do it. There's really no other way around it. So yeah, get in there, wipe everything down as best you can, and get all that crud and disgusting dirt and stuff out of there. Also, don't forget your front crank here too. You can get in here with the rag and wipe everything down as much as you can and get all the grit and dirt and grossness out of here as well. There's no penalty to wiping any of this stuff down. So keep this clean. Again, you do not need lubricant on any of this. You do not need lubricant on any of this unless you want to lubricate the pivot points. You just move with your hands, see where it moves. One little drop of lubricant literally is all it needs, and then wipe it off, get in there with the rag, get as much out of there as you can. So yeah, pretty easy, right? All you got to do is lubricate it and wipe it down, wipe it down, wipe it down. That'll keep your drivetrain moving nice and smoothly, and hopefully you won't have to call me as often. So that's the whole video. That's everything you need to know. There is a section after this if you want to learn about the different kinds of lubrication and also when you should lubricate your bike. But for the basics of how to do it, that's all you need to know. So how often do you lubricate your chain? How often should you lubricate your chain is really the question. It really just comes down to how much you ride and where you ride and all those kinds of things. A bicycle is an unusual mechanical device in that everything is exposed. Your lawnmower, your car, all these other mechanical devices that have like an oily drivetrain are all enclosed. So most of the stuff in there stays pretty clean. Obviously oil gets filthy in a car, but that's all just from the internal stuff. You're not throwing a lot of dirt and grass and sand and extra things in there. So really, it's kind of your best judgment as to when you need to lubricate your chain. General rule of thumb, really general, is like once every month or two if you're riding in mostly dry conditions. If it gets rained on, or if you take it to the coast, do it immediately. Let's re-lubricate and clean to wipe it off to get all the salt and water and stuff off of there as quickly as possible, so you don't get rust, you don't get that iron oxide. But other than that, like once every 6 to 8 weeks or something, if you're riding pretty regularly, or as needed if it's making noises, lubricate it and wipe it off, wipe it off, wipe it off. So there are two major categories of lubrication for the average consumer. There is dry lubricant and there is wet lubricant. Before we get into those, let's talk about why we lubricate our chain at all. This is a perfect example of a chain that is disgusting and rusty. And what is rust? Rust is iron oxide. This one was so nasty I actually had to cut it off the bike. Iron oxide is the iron in the chain bonding with oxygen and turning into a different molecule. And then the iron is removed from the chain, making the chain weaker. And the rust itself gums everything up and keeps it from moving smoothly. So nasty, not a great thing to happen. Iron and oxygen bond all the time, totally normal. Rust on a bicycle is completely normal, but we want to reduce it as much as possible. And salt and water are two things that act like a catalyst and speed up the whole process. So that's why when you go out to the beach where there's a lot of salt in the air, it makes your stuff rust faster. If you live up north where there's a lot of salt on the roads, it makes everything rust faster. What the lubricant actually does is it acts as a barrier on the metal pieces and keeps the salt and the oxygen and all that stuff from getting to the iron in the chain and prevents it from bonding and turning into rust, or at least slows down the process significantly. That's why we lubricate our chains. Let's get into different kinds. So we have a dry lubricant here, and we have what's called a wet lubricant here. This is actually literally not chain lube. I don't have any chain lube right now that is an oil or a wet lubricant, but I have this just as an example to show you what it looks like. Dry doesn't make any sense. What do you mean by dry? Dry means there is liquid in here, but the actual lubricant in this bottle is Teflon and it's suspended in the liquid. So you have to shake it really well. And then you put it on your chain like that. And as you can see already, some of these particles are starting to separate slightly. So there's a wetness here, and then there is the particles in there. If I left this on my hand for a few days, all this would evaporate and I'd be left with just the lubricant, which is the pieces that are in there. I don't know if you can see it very well, but on the tip of this hose, there's always a little bit of extra white stuff. That is the actual Teflon itself. That is the magic that lubricates everything. So the reason we use a dry lubricant is it's much cleaner. It goes on the chain and then it evaporates and leaves just the lube where you want it. And so oil and dust and dirt and things like that don't stick to the chain as easily. And so you don't have to clean it as often. So dry lubricant works really well for that. That's the upside of dry lubricant. It also doesn't wash off very easily, but it technically does wash off a little bit faster than a wet lubricant. So wet lubricants are oil-based lubricants and they are literally oil. So this is what wet lube looks like. This is pretty thick compared to your typical chain lube, but you get the point. It is oil. So it literally goes on your chain, and if I came back in a month from now, it would look exactly the same like this. It is an oil. So, and you can see even when I wipe it off my hand, it leaves an oily residue. As hard as I wipe, I'm gonna have to get soap and water to get that off of there. It does leave an oily residue and prevents that oxygen from bonding with the iron in the chain. So dry and wet lubricants, two different kinds. Dry lubricants, there are ceramic dry lubricants, there are wax-based dry lubricants, there are Teflon-based dry lubricants. There's a whole bunch of different kinds. Oil-based, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of oil-based lubricants, but you do want to use a bicycle-specific oil-based lubricant. You saw how sticky this stuff was. So if I use this on a chain, it would get disgusting really fast. But once again, the real trick is lubricate, wipe it off, lubricate, wipe it off. That's what does the magic. It'll keep your chain running a lot smoother. You can research and watch a lot of other videos out there about this kind of stuff. You know, if you ask 2 bicycle mechanics, you're going to get 4 different opinions on lubricants. But in this part of the country, in Raleigh, North Carolina, dry lubricant works great. Keeps your stuff clean and running well. If you're really riding a ton, you could use oil, but it's up to you, whatever you want to use. But once again, the trick is lubricate, wipe it off, lubricate, wipe it off. That's it. That's all you need to know about lube and rust and chains. And of course, get on the rabbit hole online, find whatever you want, or you can just shoot me a text or call me or whatever if you have any questions. Thank you so much for watching.